Hello and welcome to A Wealthy Life. This is the podcast designed for you to help you take control of your money, your mindset, and your future. And we're going to do a gear shift this week. We're going to start talking about property and how owning property is not just a side hustle, it's actually a business that you can make work for you. I'm your host. My name is Vicky Wishay, and today we're going to be diving into one of the most powerful, misunderstood, and often misused tools for building wealth, and that is property investment. Owning property isn't just the goal in itself, it's understanding how you can use it strategically to enable you to live the life you want. I see so many people who are so caught up with how many properties they own. That's a big driver. That's often something that's very much in a male thinking bigger, 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 more, more, more. But then there are also people who are quick, quick, quick. So they're taking risks. And some of the stories that we share amongst ourselves about what other people are doing are frankly hair raising. It's about being calm by understanding that this is a tool that can really make a difference for you. Now, you might have been wondering whether investing in property still makes sense in 2025 and beyond, particularly with all the mood change, if you like. But for those of us that have been in property, we've been living with this for years, since the Cameron and Osborne government, when they first started attacking private property investment. And I always still wonder why. Why would you stop people being private landlords? And they're going to claim that it's because it's about quality. But I wonder if the reality is that the lobbyists want to control. We're getting back to the fact that they want to have the big landlords like the pension companies take over from where the councils did, so that larger organizations are controlling larger swathes of land. But I wander off down a little conspiracy theory here. I want you to think about property in a way that it can leverage your time, leverage your money, leverage your skills to help you create the life you want. And maybe you've already got property that isn't delivering. I want this episode to give you the clarity and the confidence and even some of the practical insights to start making some smart moves to make property work for you and definitely not make you work for property. Let's start with, if you like, a bit of a history, a background to property and why it still works and why it has always worked. Because there's a fundamental truth here. Property is one of the most stable long-term wealth building tools that is still available to us. We can go all the way back to 1066 and the Battle of Hastings. We can see throughout history that whoever was the king has been carving up the land, giving it out to their favored lords and backers, and that these wealthy individuals now effectively became estate owners. They built rental properties to house staff and those serving in their manor houses, establishing that first sense of the landlord-tenant relationship. But we've moved way beyond 1066, even the 1600s, as you start to come into the modern world, really only the 1990s, because back again at pre-war, we were looking about slum landlords and industrialization and keeping people poor. But this more modern buy-to-let, this more modern residential landlord has really started to take traction in the UK since the 1900s. And did you know that the first buy-to-let mortgage products really only became available in 1996? And while the idea of renting out property existed before then, there's sort of the formalized process to allow the ordinary man and woman to access it and make it a more popular investment strategy is, what are we talking about here? Less than 30 years old. So while historically property is an old industry, it can still work for you without making anyone your servant or even making you a servant of property, particularly if it aligns with your goals. Now, what's the problem here? Well, the problem is too many people fall into property by accident. through inheritance, through relationship breakups, or maybe even actually some outdated advice or get rich quick schemes. And then what they're left with is an asset that is simply causing them stress and doesn't provide the financial security it should. Is that property's fault? No, I would say it's the property owner's fault, but even then, not necessarily. So here's what makes property valuable in 2025. That it is a tangible, inflation protected against asset. If prices rise, so does the value of your property. Of course, only if you own that asset. But if the prices fall, while the capital value of the property might drop back slightly, you're still getting the same rental value. And that's the thing about property, is it gives you money two ways. One, let's call it semi-guaranteed through rent, in that you have an agreement and you put the tenant in. That tenant could stay the next 10 years. I bought a property for a client recently where the tenant had lived there for 17 years. Can you imagine 17 years of guaranteed rental income? And then, of course, there is the more, that's not English, the more less guaranteed or the less guaranteed or the unguaranteed version of the capital inflation, which does go up and down. But you're still going to be getting the monthly income, and it's the monthly income that helps you to change your life. Number two, why is property still valuable in 2025 and beyond? Because it leverages your money. It is the only investment that you can get a loan on. You can't get a loan to buy your shares. I mean, you can get a loan different ways, but the government doesn't give you 75% of your pension portfolio or 75% of your crypto portfolio or 75% loan against gold. Yes, you can use those assets later to leverage against brokerage and bridging finance and things like that. But a bank will lend you 75% of the cost of a house, the purchase price of a house, allowing you to use your cash flow and your assets more wisely to spread them. And people often say to me, but if we just use the sum 100,000, I've got 100,000 pounds. Why wouldn't I buy one house outright? Because mathematically and from a risk diversification perspective, you'd be better off spreading that money out and spending 25,000 pounds on each house. Obviously, there are other costs involved, but let's say 25, getting 4 houses where you've got 4 chances to get rent. If one becomes empty, there are still 3 others. Yes, you've got 4 roofs and 4 boilers, but we've qualified all of that in terms of analysing the figures. But even though you are paying for 4 mortgages instead of paying for no mortgages, you will still end up with more cash flow and a better return on your money. Your money will be making you more money. Now, being inflation based and going up in price, leveraging your money via bank mortgages, and of course, there being consistent demand for good quality homes. We know there's a housing shortage. Property will still only work if you have a clear strategy. Now, a strategy isn't buy to let or HMOs or flipping. A strategy is I have these financial resources and this amount of time and knowledge. And if I leverage it into property, I'm going to get this outcome. That's the strategy, the bigger picture. Everything else is a technique, how you are then going to apply that strategy. And your techniques will change. Your strategy will broadly stay the same. I'm looking to create a monthly cash flow so I don't have to rely on wages. That's your strategy. That may stay forever until you have completely replaced your wages and decided to retire. But the techniques that you use underneath that strategic umbrella will change. And what I want to share with you, as I always do, is to let you know how it can go wrong as well as how you can do it right, is what are the 3 biggest mistakes I see people making with property. Number 1, emotional buying. That's just the same as when we're talking about our finances in previous podcasts. Falling in love with a property. It might look great. Every property I have said, I love that property. I love that property. It has not given me as much cash flow as a property that I have not loved. And that's nothing to do with the way it looks. It's absolutely to do with the way you feel at that moment. Property is not personal, it's a business decision, and the Excel spreadsheet must lead the way, which is why I always share an Excel spreadsheet before I give anybody any decisions, even a photograph of the house, because I want my clients to understand the maths before they get distracted by how something looks. And then the idea of an exit strategy. Now, this isn't necessarily about selling the property, but this is about how your money is going to be returned back to you. So, what is the return on your investment? Are you going to rent and hold the property? I'm not a big fan of flipping properties, because if you buy a property now, it's the cheapest you will ever buy it, unless it was yesterday. But each of these strategies, whether it's long-term holding, whether it's flipping, anything like that, requires a different investment product, a different service, and potentially even the house and its location will change. But the real thing about the exit strategy for me is more around how your property portfolio will evolve over the time. And there's been a podcast on these 3 phases of property investment. So at the beginning, you're going to be in an investment phase, acquisition phase, where you're going to be looking to have money to plow into the properties. Then you're going to consolidate. And at that point, you just check the performance of all your properties. You're probably 5 years in and you'll look at that. And eventually you're going to get to the stage where there's some business development. And this might be where you finally retire or you reduce your working hours, and you might look at what you do with your portfolio in terms of paying down. And so you might then start to sell one property and pay down. And so you reduce the size of your portfolio while increasing the cash flow. Having that sort of awareness that you're going to go through different phases of your business strategy as it applies to property is really important. And again, obviously something that I would help with. And then underestimating the amount of work involved in property. We so often talk about passive investments, and I loathe that term. You don't want to be passive with your property investments. You actually need to be active. Even if you are working with me and we have all the systems involved, we've still got tenants. There will be voids. It's bound to happen that a tenant will leave eventually. We've got regulatory changes. You're going to have refurbishment costs. You cannot decide to do this all yourself. You're going to need a team to work with you, but you then cannot abdicate all responsibility to that team. You need to be actively involved. So as I spoke to you about, I think it was only last week, where we were talking about the data points and the things that you need to keep an eye on a monthly basis, you will have that with property as well. You will have data points that you are checking in on. What's the income? Has the income come in? What are the expenses? Is my tenant still happy in the property, or have they given notice? How are the repairs performing? And overall, what's my long-term property plan? Absolutely fine. If you make these mistakes, if you are emotional about property, if you don't think strategically about property, and if you underestimate the work, then you will make uninformed decisions about property investment. And of course, that's what I do for my clients. I help them make better informed decisions. Now, what should property do for you if it's working well? It should give you cash flow, a monthly income. There should, over time, although not guaranteed, because we can't guarantee what's going on in the future, be an increase in the capital gain. It's going to enable you to leverage both your time and your money if we do it well together. And it's going to give you options down the line on how you can repurpose this portfolio to meet the needs of your future self. And if it's not giving you at least 2, quite probably all of those options, all of those outcomes, then you need to rethink how you are dealing with property and book a call so I can help you. What I'd like to do is get you to answer these questions. Will investing in property help or hinder your personal goals? And so, what I would say here, that's about the different techniques. You may already be investing in property, you may be property curious. Don't be fooled by Airbnb SA, which SA means self-managed accommodation. In fact, I can't remember what SA stands for. But don't be fooled. Serviced accommodation. There you go. But don't be fooled by terms like Airbnb or SA, which is serviced accommodation or holiday lets. They're full-time jobs. They just make you a hotel or a bed and breakfast manager. That's not what you're looking for. Don't be fooled by going into complex strategies on day one when you don't really understand what you're getting into. Something that is highly legal. So, for example, splitting freeholds. And even though I did that podcast with Jason about understanding short-term leases on flats, that's a complex advanced strategy. And you need support before you go getting into this type of technique to invest in property. And my advice would be vanilla. Everybody says to me apologetically, oh, your strategy is vanilla lets. Yes. And look at the life I lead because of it. Simple buy-to-let properties providing decent homes to decent families that in return give me a decent cash flow. Awesome. No headaches. Now, that doesn't mean to say that a tenant doesn't move on, but I'm clear about my numbers. Are you clear about your numbers? Do you really understand the profit and the loss that you're making? And have you got an experienced accountant to help you? All of this is in the Wealthy Life community. You can go and listen to Craig's interview as part of the Inner Circle resources. And do you have a plan, or are you just hoping it works out? Please, please say that you have a plan. So think about this for yourself. Is property helping you or hindering your goals? Are you clear on your numbers, and do you have a plan? And if your answer to any of those is no, we definitely need a call. Because when you see property as a tool, not as a trophy, not as something to put on social media, everything starts to shift. It is a tool to help you create the life that you want to live, a wealthy life. So you don't need to start with 10 houses either. You just need an overall financial strategy and a clear plan to move forward. So let's ask just a few more questions here. What is your end goal? Do you want income? Is that for lifestyle? Is that for legacy? Is that to pay for children's private education? If you understand what the cash flow that you want to get out of property is to do for you, that will help shape the techniques that you use. Have you evaluated your resources? What have you got that can start this investment journey for you? Have you got the money, the skills, the time, the contacts? Now, that's why I love mentoring, because every client starts from a different position. And of course, for my sourcing clients, then their driving resource, if you like, is probably a lack of time and an abundance of money. But for a mentoring client, it can be a combination of all these things: money, skills, time, and contacts. You need to know your numbers inside and out. For example, the purchase cost, obviously, but the overhead costs, things like your solicitors, your broker, stamp duty. And then there are the variable costs like the refurbishment that you might need to do. And what will that do to your ROI, the return on your investment? How much will you make based on the money that you put in and have to spend? And of course, if you're actually going to get into this for yourself, then you're going to start defining your buying career. There's criteria. You're going to start defining your buying criteria. This is the location. Now, this is most important. This is not necessarily where's closest to you, but this is where the numbers work for you. And you can do all of that alone, or you can do it with someone like me. Of course, there's no one quite like me, only me. I can help you find the properties. And then we need to look at what's your preferred tenant type. And goodness, they all have challenges, from noisy tenants to ambitious young people who move on and off, to families with the children, and of course, benefit tenants. But none of those are actually a hurdle. I would never allow a tenant type to affect the property I bought. The area might, the feeling of an area might influence, well, would definitely influence where I bought, but not the tenant type themselves. And of course, you're going to do all of this with a team, whether that includes me as your mentor or as your sourcing agent. You're going to need a broker and a solicitor somewhere along the way. And when you work with me, then obviously I have all that team and I share them with my client mentees, my bespoke sourcing clients. That's part of the service that I offer, and that would be something that you would need to create for yourself if you're going to go it alone. And then this notion again, I'm still going to use the phrase exit strategy, but I don't mean necessarily selling, but understanding, let's call it the lifetime of the property and the portfolio. It's what's your goal? When will you have enough properties or enough cash flow? And when that happens, what will you do about it? I mentioned the 3 stages of a property business. So check out that podcast. We'll put the link for you in the show notes. This is how wealthy and, more importantly, successful people invest in property. They have a clear goal. They understand their resources and how they can leverage them. They know the numbers. They have a clear buying criteria and, of course, a team and an overall view, a strategic view of what it is that they are looking to achieve through property investment. This is just a short video. Now, whether you're new to investing or you already own property, the key is the same. What is your strategy? And if you want help on getting that clear path, then there is a guide. Obviously, you can go all the way back to the YouTube channel and start looking all the way through at how to invest in property, ultimately by managing your money through the Smart Woman's Ultimate Guide to Money and Investing. You can go through the Wealthy Life community and there will be a link in there. There are plenty of interviews and resources where you can think about property. You can book a call with me if you're serious about creating a property plan for 2025 and beyond. Just book a call in my diary. The link again will be in the show notes. And if you've actually got to the stage where you feel like, I think I really do want to invest in property, but I want to understand what it involves for myself, then I offer a course, which is a self-learning course. So all the videos have been created. There are hours in there. I think we're well over 40 hours worth of videos as part of this course that you can watch at your own pace. Take yourself all the way through this, and you will have my mentoring support around that. What I want to do at the end of this episode, as always, is leave you with 3 insights, add a little bit more whoosh into your life, and to help you think whether property is a path for you. And the first one I would say to you is that property is not a passive strategy. It's a business, a strategic business. If it's not going to give you income or equity or leverage or help you create your goals, then it's not working for you, it's working against you, and we definitely need to speak. Smart investors don't just buy the property, they're buying the outcome of buying the property. That's what they're investing in. Yes, there is the asset, but they're investing in the outcome. Having that clear goal on whether there is cash flow or capital gain or both is really, really important. And also, it's not just about the number of properties, it's about the right properties for you. And that comes from having that plan, a well-chosen plan that might give you just one property that could unlock just that little extra cash flow that aligns with your values, aligns with your goals, and makes you feel that bit much more secure. That would be incredible. And you could then move on eventually over the next 5 years to get 3 properties, or maybe over the next 10 years to get 5 properties. It's not about the hustle and the speed. It's about the clarity and the plan to make sure that every single property you invest in serves you and leads towards your wealthy life. Until next time, my name's Vicky Wushay, and as always, if this has sparked your interest, then get in touch some way. through the YouTube channel, through the community, or book a call if you really want to learn more about investing in property, or you're interested in the course that I mentioned that would take you through the steps that you really could do with understanding before you start investing in property. And again, if you know somebody who's been talking about property but doesn't know where to start, please share my contact details with them. Share this podcast with them. And as always, I will see you next week. Make sure you've subscribed so that you don't miss an episode. Thank you very much for listening, and I will speak to you again very soon.